All right, so it looks like a pretty major Democrat has come out against Shapiro, but it's probably not who you thought it would be. So it's actually John Fetterman. So John Fetterman, who is sort of elected to be like the working class guy, the dude who doesn't dress in the suits and just kind of wears regular attire. He's of the working man or whatever. He basically did like a complete 180 almost immediately after getting elected, and now he's like just a massive Israel shill and is basically turning on everything that he had previously supported. So he's basically just a complete clown now, pretty much. But it appears that he's like probably the biggest Democrat so far who is like against Shapiro, is what it appears. And there's a really big story to this that's really important, actually. And if they've told Harris this, I don't know if you guys know this, but Harris is actually hosting a vetting day. This was today, but for you it'll probably be yesterday when you're watching this video. It says Vice President Kamala Harris is expected to meet with her vetting team today for a series of in-depth presentations on each of the finalists to be her running mate. Each briefing is expected to last about 60 to 90 minutes, but some could be shorter or longer depending on what needs to be discussed, how complicated the vetting was, and any follow-up questions Harris may have. The presentation Saturday may result in reducing the number of candidates whom Harris will invite for final interviews scheduled to take place Sunday. So these are the kinds of things that would likely go into that kind of this, vetting, and then also in the interview. So let's check out what he's talking about. So here it says Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman is concerned about the possibility that Vice President Kamala Harris might choose the state's Governor Josh Shapiro as her running mate, and his advisors have privately relayed those worries to Harris's team, according to people familiar with the conversations. That's quite the run-on sentence. Fetterman's advisors suggested to Harris's team that the senator believes that Shapiro is excessively focused on his own personal ambitions. His reservations about Shapiro reflect a long-running rivalry between the two ambitious Democrats, who have risen on parallel tracks in a politically crucial state. This sounds a little bit like an anime storyline, like they're like rivals, like Goku and Vegeta type shit. And then it says, for Fetterman's representatives to reveal his concerns to the party's new standard-bearers team underscores the intense scrutiny being applied to possible running mates and the high stakes of a decision that has the potential to shape the Democratic Party for years to come. This is a really consequential decision, by the way, guys. And then it says, Shapiro has risen to the top of the short list of Harris's possible vice presidential picks. Harris is interviewing several contenders this weekend and is scheduled to hold a rally with their running mate on Tuesday in Philadelphia. It's kind of crazy that they're announcing it on Tuesday because there's literal vetting going on Saturday, and then there's interviews happening on Sunday, which Governor Tim Walz is a part of, luckily. It says Fetterman's representatives explained to Harris's aides that one of the key disagreements the men had while they served together on Pennsylvania's Board of Pardons, according to the three people who were granted anonymity to describe internal conversations. Fetterman sought to revitalize the institution and provide second chances to some convicts. Shapiro often took a less lenient position, arguing that he believed in criminal justice reform, but that the commutations process was not the place for, quote, structural changes. Fetterman and Shapiro clashed in particular over the fate of Lee and Dennis Horton, brothers who had been convicted in a fatal shooting and robbery in 1993, but maintained their innocence for decades. As Harris makes her decision under the pressure of a highly compressed time frame, there have been furious efforts by both supporters and critics of Shapiro to influence the vice president's pick. Other candidates' backers and opponents have joined in on the lobbying. Many Pennsylvania Democrats, including Senator Bob Casey, have openly thrown their weight behind Shapiro for vice president, but Fetterman has been notably silent in public. During the behind-the-scenes conversations in recent days, Fetterman's team expressed his, quote, full-on enthusiastic support for Kamala Harris, one person familiar with the discussion said. Another thing that's kind of weird about this situation is Fetterman was a diehard Biden supporter, and because of all the controversy that was going on with Biden not running, it pretty much made a situation where it was kind of a shadow race between Biden and Harris. And so it makes me curious as to, does Kamala view him being super pro-Biden as a negative? Because technically, even though she wasn't necessarily the next person, everyone kind of knew it was either Kamala or Biden, right? So does she take that as a good thing, a bad thing, as neutral? I'm not sure. It says, in this person's description, Fetterman's advisors offered his unvarnished assessment. Ew, unvarnished is a disgusting word. Of Shapiro that is not about policy differences or other public baggage. A Fetterman spokesperson did not respond to a request for comment. Shapiro spokesperson Will Simons defended the governor's record on the Board of Pardons. Quote, and by the way, this is a different Shapiro spokesperson. The Shapiro spokespeople are really busy people. They're really busy. Because in this article here about the issue of the sexual harassment allegation, it's Manuel Bonder who responds. And then in the situation with the Palestine issue, the also response was issued by this guy, Manuel Bonder. So I guess there's multiple spokespeople. They have multiple spokespeople on the team because they are quite busy, it looks like. It says, defended the governor's record on the Board of Pardons. Quote, the governor evaluates every pardons case individually and on its merits, and during his time as Attorney General, he approved more pardons and commutations than all of his predecessors over the last 25 years combined. He said he is proud of his record of delivering meaningful criminal justice reform while making Pennsylvania communities safer. So it talks about how this has been like a long simmering sort of battle between the two. And so they were both kind of always had this kind of higher offices in their sights. And so it goes more into the details of this Lee and Dennis situation. It says, on the Board of Pardons in December 2019, Lee and Dennis Horton's freedom came up for a vote. The brothers were seen within the walls as model prisoners, and their own prison superintendent advocated for their release. Their clemency applications failed 2-3, with Shapiro opposing them and Fetterman in favor. Shapiro expressed frustration that were missing court documents in the case. So 2-3 against, and so Shapiro voting, opposing them, so he's the swing vote. If Shapiro votes in favor, it's 3-2 to release them. And saying, afterward, Fetterman told the Philadelphia Inquirer that, quote, the trajectory of my career in public service will be determined by their freedom or lack thereof. A thinly veiled threat to run against Shapiro for governor in 2022. I had no idea. When the Horton brothers' clemency came up for vote again in December 2020, the board supported it, including Shapiro. The then Attorney General spokesperson said he wanted time to interview the two men separately and review the missing files. Fetterman saw the episode as an example of Shapiro putting his political future ahead of doing what Fetterman thought was right. Shapiro has said that politics weren't a factor in his decision on the Pardons Board, and that he believes there are deep and problematic structural issues within our justice system, but, quote, you can't solve those deep structural issues by a commutation process because we're forced to look at these cases on an individual basis. So what I'm honestly noticing a lot of is he kind of does like red herring fallacies a lot. He doesn't really answer the question, a lot of non sequiturs and red herrings, because he's not really answering the issue as to whether or not decision. I guess the question specifically is about his decision on the Pardons Board, or even the previous one. Anytime he's kind of asked about it, he kind of just tries to talk about something else, or like his spokespeople kind of just try to, him or his spokespeople try to just talk about something different instead of the actual topic at hand. It says, earlier this week, Shapiro was asked by the Philadelphia Inquirer if he ever prioritized ambition over personal relationships. I recognize that at this moment and probably every moment in my life, folks are judging me from the outside, and that's fine. It's part of the business. I'm most comfortable with every decision I've made that's always been about service. Again, he kind of tries to change it to something else. He kind of adds in not being about service, but the thrust of the entire comment is about something entirely different. It has nothing to do with whether, hey, like, did you ever prioritize ambition over personal relations? Oh, well, a bunch of people are judging me from the outside. And like, he's such a weasel. This guy's a fucking weasel, dude. And just talks about this, and it can't even say that CNN reported that a senior advisor to Joe Biden said the president is a big fan of Shapiro without mentioning Walls also, which really shows it. And then this is a great paragraph at the end. It says, at the same time, Shapiro has been attacked by his opponents, particularly those on the left. He has angered pro-Palestinian activists for his staunch support of Israel, as well as teachers' unions, due to his backing of school vouchers. He has also come under fire for his handling of alleged sexual harassment by one of his top aides. And that's a lot of stuff, dude. That is a lot of that's three big issues right there, big ones. The alleged sexual harassment was huge, too, because of, it wasn't him, it was one of his, really close people, but it's like one of his really close people. And I think his office had even settled the case. So, Fetterman, I think, is kind of like the biggest Democrat I've seen who's coming out against him. He seems pretty prominent. I don't support Fetterman or like Fetterman. None of us do, so we're not taking what he does like, oh, it's gospel or whatever. But I think if even Fetterman is doing this, this says something. Now, how legitimate is what Fetterman doing? Because kind of what Fetterman is doing kind of is also just like you're probably just mad about you not being able to advance your own political things maybe, and you've been kind of in a Goku Vegeta type of war here, and you're not Goku kind of thing. But, this is a bad sign for Shapiro. There's a lot of concerns about him. There aren't really many concerns about Walls, which I think makes Walls the better pick. Even though if he gives you a better chance in Pennsylvania, he might make your chances worse. And I don't know, the national scrutiny might even hurt him in Pennsylvania. And how much impact he'll have on a PA ticket is questionable also. But you know how Fetterman coming out against him, well, he's not coming out against him, is doing privately. Privately he's doing it. And then Sean Fain, the president of UAW, has come out against him as well. And then there's all these litany of controversies. And then there's another one that's even another controversy that's even like bubbling up beneath the surface. And I'm not sure if it's going to get big or how true it is. But there's a lot of stuff going on with Shapiro. So, again, I think if this vetting process that supposedly the Kamala Harris campaign is running is legit, they will choose Walls. They will choose him. Not Walls, but they won't choose Shapiro because I don't think it's possible to have a thorough vetting process and not see this stuff. And then you would have to conclude that all of this massive amount of stuff, you can't choose him because there's too much of a threat to your campaign and it's not worth the risk. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I did not expect this, and I had no idea about all this stuff. I had no clue there was this war between them going on for their political ambitions, and I didn't know about this situation with the pardon board and that kind of thing, and that vote on there. So it gives us an insight, Shapiro, and it's like the fact that the Philadelphia Inquirer asked him if he ever put his political ambitions over political relations means that there's some kind of smoke to this kind of ambition stuff. It's not, and so there should be a fire. It's like there's already some kind of like media idea of it, so something kind of has to be there in terms of what's going on. But I had no idea because I'm not from Philly or Pennsylvania. I mean, but yeah, pretty interesting stuff. So the backlash against Shapiro, I think, is growing amongst politicians, as well as there's more and more controversies because the article he wrote on Israel from 20 years ago also resurfaced. So it's pretty interesting to see. Let me know your thoughts on this down below.